They haven't picked a design yet? I think they concluded the bidding phase a few days ago. I heard it's ambitious, functional, and maybe even pioneering. The only thing to consider is that, since this is so sophisticated, it looks like it'll be a rather expensive project on its own. And I think you seem like the perfect fit for that role. Locomotive Superintendent? I'm one of your new goods engines. There's much doubt between us engines as to whether or not there will be any sufficient work for you. Would you be the new engines for express services? Yes, that would be us. Well, nothing more than the fact I was expecting you to arrive via rail. We were told we could only get to the island with a boat. It's going horribly as of now. What happened? Let's see. Improper design plans, bad luck with weather, lazy workers, and a build code violation. But we're already so far behind that they have to overlap some stuff in order not to fall any further. Because these weren't intended to be the railway's new express coaches. 2 weeks from now, we'll have the grand opening of the new mainline extensions. While you, Neil, Clive, and Matthew are to be retained for shunting duties and maintenance work. So, for the sake of the railway, we'd be perfectly okay with a change of pace. How well are the new services doing? You really are that naive, sir. Ugh, get out! We're soon to receive the new express locomotives from the works. Ah, the predecessor. Do keep back with that way of talking. But hopefully this can turn out to be a bit of a breather for it. The express locomotive is going to be a 460, while the goods locomotive is to be a 280. What's your name? It's Mr. I am better. My name's Chester. I think you're just afraid that I'll be the pride of the goods crew while you're slowly superseded. Can you cover for him on the morning express train? How are you feeling right now? Not good. But that damn bored. No care for safety whatsoever. Hopefully you can make him a little happy. What the hell? A large section of the coal mine has collapsed, but I'll do my damn best to make them handle it properly. This is about the lowest point. The railway was in a worse position than ever before. In the span of just 1 week, the railway was suddenly responsible for the death of 67 people and another 100 or so injuries. Never before have we experienced anything like this. We'd kept a clean record until then, somehow, but that was now completely shattered. And to think, both of those incidents were the railway's fault. Even the collapse of the mine? Even the collapse of the mine. The investigation following the mine's collapse would prove to be quite damaging. The conclusion was simple. The mine collapsed because of weak supports. Or rather, a build code violation that was deliberately overlooked during an expansion of the mine's network. The prior support designs, which were very sturdy and strong, were overlooked in favor of a simpler and much cheaper alternative that, well, proved to be fatal. It shouldn't surprise you to know that the company responsible for the supports was the same company that had provided the build code violation for the rolling bridge. A company, mind you, that Remus had a lot of equity in. So, conflict of interest. Pretty much. The man went out of his way to avoid more competent and well-trusted construction companies, just to avoid the pretty lucrative contract to a company that he would get a significant pay from as a result. And yeah, safe to say, Remus greatly increased his wealth through this. I'm lost for words. You're telling me that Remus prioritized his wealth over safety? Yes, he did. Oh, for Christ's sake. I thought I'd heard the worst of him, but I guess not. I guess that leads to the obvious follow-up question. How did the board handle the two incidents? Well, I don't know what you're expecting. What I can say is that it was cruel, unethical, and of course, stupid. Gentlemen, as you're all aware, last week brought us significant setbacks. The express derailment at Rolf's Castle claimed the lives of 23 passengers. Additionally, 83 were injured, 19 of them critically. The cause? Deterioration of the outer rail on curve 17B. The investigation confirms that it had not been properly inspected since 1891. The cleanup I've previously laid out has now been completed. The line is now ready to receive traffic once again. We will make no formal statements. No vigils, no plaques. We acknowledge the tragedy by returning to service. Swiftly and without theatrics. Theatrics. The press will of course speculate. Let them. We will not dignify hysteria with panic. The public sees silence as strength. Dignity, control. Yeah, and I'm sure the families of the dead will find that very comforting. Julian, you'll have your turn. Will I? Or will this be another performance where we all clap and nod while you feed us with more delusion? Delusion is refusing to acknowledge that mourning costs more than rebuilding. Now, the second matter. Unreported, as of this morning. The collapse of the Great Watterson coal mine. 44 workers unaccounted for, presumed dead. Partial collapse blamed on unsealed shaft failures and a lack of any proper reinforcement stemming from the section's weak supports. It is imperative this incident does not reach the press. Not yet. The public can weather one storm, but not two. We must control the narrative, delay acknowledgement, and redirect attention. You're covering it up? We are buying time. You're burying men twice. Once on the stone, and again on the silence. Julian, please. No. No more sitting quietly while this board sells its soul to avoid headlines. 23 people are dead from a crash that you caused. And now 44 more, crushed under a mine you neglected. And what's the answer? Sweep it, spin it, forget it ever happened? Enough, Julian. No! You do not get to silence this, Remus. You don't get to present this as some clever game of optics. These are human beings. Workers, mothers, fathers, children. You speak of dignity while offering none. Julian, if you are unable to contribute constructively, you may excuse yourself. Constructively! The only construction happening in this room is the wall you're building between truth and accountability. Get out, Julian! One day, you won't be able to hide behind that voice and that suit and that polished lie of yours. One day it'll catch up to you, and when it does, no amount of silence will save you. You are excused, Julian Cecil. Now, regarding the next wave of expansions, how are we doing on that? Julian? Oh, thank God. I need a level-headed individual to talk to. Good Lord, Julian. You look in terrible state of mind. I feel so. What happened? Well, you know when we hoped that the board would handle these two incidents in a somewhat dignified way? Yeah? Well, I can tell you now that it's nowhere near what we were hoping for. What's the planned approach? Sweep it under the rug. No. No further statements on Mr.'s crash, and no statement at all on the mine's collapse. In fact, they plan to keep it from the public. Are you kidding me? I freaking wish. I'm done. I'm done. I can't deal with this anymore. They've crossed the line for good now. This is straight up evil. That seems to be a bit of an understatement. I don't want to use any worse a title, even though most are perfectly fitting. Right, it's time to take major steps now. They cannot get away with this. I'm declaring war now. War even? Well, that's one way of saying it. I wish you good luck with that, but I'm sorry to say it does seem like a bit of an unwinnable war. And that's probably what Remus is thinking as well. However, I'm 100% sure that there's one ally I can gain that'll get things moving in my favor. Who? The Duke. The Duke. The Duke. The same Duke who signed off on all those destructive construction projects. The very same. Though, not quite the same man. Remember, David II was young when all this began, inexperienced and hungry for validation. Remus fed him grand promises of glory, legacy, and progress, and he believed it. But by the time of the two incidents, he changed. He was now in his early 40s, much more confident. He'd grown into his role as Duke, and gained something that made him dangerous to men like Remus. Dignity and wisdom. So what happened? Remus kept him in the dark, same as the public. The Duke was never shown any real reports or financial records. As far as David knew, the railway was doing fine. His role had been reduced to that of a simple wallet, another source of income. And with the sudden financial crash of 1905, David had his hands full stabilizing the economy. The last thing on his desk was railway oversight. Remus used that. For years he kept David blind. That was, until a certain whistleblower came knocking. Julian? Walked into the Duke's office with 3 suitcases full of documents, reports, invoices, letters, everything. And when David saw it all laid bare, he was furious. Any shred of trust he might have had left on the board vanished that day. David was fed up with the broken promises, greedy attitudes, and lies that the railway's board members were presenting him. Julian was assured that things would be taken care of. So, 2 days later, he called a meeting with Remus to discuss the future. Afternoon, Your Grace. Afternoon, Remus. It's Sir, Your Grace. See, I don't really know if you're still deserving of that title. Sorry? Don't be daft, Remus. Hiding a tragedy from the public. Not bothering to address the cause of the Rolf's castle crash? What kind of ruthless thing is that? Yeah, Grace, if we put any more spotlight on the crash, it would only worsen the situation. As for the mine, if it got out to the public, our reputation would suffer greatly. And you think that hiding it was the better thing to do? Let me tell you something, Remus. When this reaches the public, something it'll do tomorrow, by the way, your reputation will suffer even more than it would've. You're right, Your Grace. That was a terrible mistake. I promise that we'll make things right. Our efforts will increase. But I can assure you that we're working our hardest to make the Sodor Mainland a better railway. Is that so? You know you have a lot of catching up to do. What do you mean? You haven't turned a profit in 17 years, and it has increasingly been getting worse. Not only that, you're financing all of this with state money. Remus, I ask you no more than what's necessary. I simply ask you one thing. Make profit. Oh, well, on that note, we have a few things to present to you, Your Grace. We have several plans to help the fortunes of the railway. We've already made preparations for the cement work that we promised, so we can bring some more income to the railway. Based on our calculations, the profits from this establishment will be able to cover the loss of the mine. Also, perhaps more vital to our recovery plan, is a project that we're working on which is another extension to our main line, this time running all the way to Peel Godred. We'll be able to serve the businesses way more efficiently than the roads currently are. It's quite ambitious, I know, but we're taking the right steps to make sure it'll be done in the most proper way possible. You didn't let me finish. What? I simply ask you one thing, Remus. Make profit with what you have. Well, Your Grace, with the current predicament that we're in, we've concluded that it's simply not possible to do such a thing with what we have at the moment. Interesting. Because I had one of the board members in for a meeting a few days ago, and I asked him the exact same question, to which he gave some pretty remarkable responses. You did? Who? Someone who is quite highly ranked within your circle of board members, and one you don't agree with one bit. Julian? Oh, so you do recognize him? Weird. He says the exact opposite. Well, Your Grace, he's a bit of a mood kill. He tends to over-dramatize a lot of our proposals, something that we think is completely unnecessary. And something that I support. He is the only level-headed individual within all the board members. He's the only one to suggest sensible actions, some of which are very clever. It's a shame that you ignore him, since his ideas are really well thought out. Oh, lovely. What did he suggest? See, you'd really like to know that, wouldn't you? Shame you have to ask me about them, and not just listen to Julian when he tried to relay them to you. He hasn't. He most certainly has. Well, then he didn't present them well enough. Well, if you think his ideas weren't good enough to match my expectations, let's play a little game. You're now to go out on the other side of the door, and you're to come up with as many ideas as you can on how to fix the railway's economy with what you have. Alright, Your Grace, I can give that a try. How long do I have? 2 minutes. 2 minutes? Your Grace, that doesn't seem like a long time. Can I get a little more? No. Let's see how well you listen to Julian's ideas. If you did, 2 minutes is too long. Now, off you go. But, Your Grace, Remus, 2 minutes are ticking by the second. Did Remus succeed? No, of course he didn't. The 2 minutes went by and Remus hadn't thought of anything. And that was the final straw for David. Outraged by Remus's lack of level-minded competence, David promptly fired him on the spot. On the spot? Could he do that? It's what he did. On the spot. But not just Remus. David had the rest of the board in for meetings just like the one Remus had. And surprise, surprise, more on-the-spot firings happened, which resulted in practically the entire board being sacked. The entire board? Practically. Well, one stayed, of course. Julian. Phew, that is good. What happened to him following the firings? Well, on the orders of the Duke himself, Julian was promoted to controller. Seems logical. And it was. It really was. At long last, Julian could finally do what he'd been trying to push for decades. It was time for the railway to consolidate. And thank goodness he was the one in charge of that. He went straight to work. I wish I could list everything he did, but honestly there were so many changes I've lost track. Still, a few stood out. First thing he did was to hire a brand new set of board members. He brought in new faces. Respected, rational, competent. People the public could trust again. They were instrumental in getting the new systems and operations off the ground. The next thing he did, and perhaps the most important thing, he acknowledged the mine disaster. Publicly. No spin, no excuses. Everything was laid out, plainly and completely. He issued a formal apology, promised full compensation to the victims' families, and made sure that even those who had already filed for lawsuits and such were properly taken care of. 2 memorials were established, one for each tragedy. The way he handled it, with such dignity and respect, it was beautiful. The coal mine itself was closed permanently and the site was abandoned out of respect for the victims. The second major shift, he scrapped every expansion project still on the books. Said there was no point in building out when we couldn't take care of what we already had. So, all the railway's capital was redirected, straight into infrastructure. Every inch of track across the network was inspected, reinforced, and upgraded. The difference in ride quality was like night and day. Next, the locomotive roster saw a shake-up. There was no need for so many engines, so it was reduced. Chester was the first one to go, being sold to the Great Western Railway. He was over the moon about this. He'd been fed up the entire time he was there. He had proven to be a very irritable engine, always on edge and ready to lash out. And can you really blame him? He knew his worth, but here on Sodor he was just wasted. Any train he pulled could have been handled by Jimmy, Jacob, Roger, hell even Samson on a good day. There was nothing for him to gain on Sodor. Probably the most obvious first engine to go. Anybody else? Mister was next, went off to the Northeastern Railway. Then Joseph and Taylor, though that was more a matter of timing. Their leases were ending anyway. Still, it was a heartfelt goodbye. They'd both been key members of the roster. As for Michael and Malcolm, they stayed behind. Why? They were still needed on express services. However, they'd become much more quiet by then. Don't really know what happened. I heard they might have talked to Norris with interesting results. Supposedly, he predicted Mister's crash. Spooked them both, I think. Very interesting. Within character, I guess. Were there any other engines who were sold off? Sebastian was also sold off. They only really needed one more engine like him, since Whiff could do his job perfectly fine. The final engine to go was Roger. Roger left as well. It was deemed that 4 of them were just a little bit too much. Now, it was an unpopular choice, but Roger volunteered to be the engine to go. It was met with respectful sadness, as it would be another big goodbye, even more so than with Joseph and Taylor. But it had to be done. With the roster now appropriately sized, Julian tackled the timetable. Any unnecessary or underperforming service was axed. Instead, a more streamlined and fixed service pattern was introduced, with fewer but more frequent services. To boost the express services, the railway leased some proper set of coaches from the Great Eastern Railway to replace the old dilapidated coaches that had been used until then. These were then relegated to the other passenger trains, something that they were much more suited for. As for goods services, since the railway was now without the revenue of the Great Waters and coal mine, some major restructuring in the goods sector was implemented. The storm quarry remained in service since it didn't contain those fatal supports that the coal mine did, so the railway was still receiving a fair amount of revenue from that. But it was still decided to diversify the goods work. More contracts were secured, and more frequent and consistent goods services were implemented, resulting in a more reliable operation. Good grief, that's a lot of stuff he carried out. And like I said, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There was one more major thing he did, and it was without a doubt the most controversial thing he did. He proposed the closure of the Normanby branch, and that the Great Waterton branch was to become purely an industrial line. Really, he wanted to do that. One major thing he wanted to do was to cut any loss makers from the railway's finances. Things like the underperforming express services and the remaining sections of the coal mine. And unfortunately, by this point, both branches were proving to be a rather big strain on the railway's economy. On the Normanby branch, the fishing industry had become extremely thin. The trains were smaller than ever and there wasn't much else the branch could provide. Its passenger services were doing fine, but they weren't really giving enough back. As for the Great Waterton branch, well, that goes back to the problem with the passenger trains, which by then had worsened even more. So, with that in mind, you can't exactly blame Julian for wanting those changes. I guess not, but I can imagine that was not well received by many people. That is very correct. It was a very unpopular choice, one that was heavily protested by locals. So Julian decided on a different approach that would satisfy both parties. Instead, a new railway company was formed to take over operations on the branches, the East Saturn Railway. Now of course, in order for the new railway to be properly served, a few locomotives went along in the process. Primarily it was just the locomotives that were already operating the branches. Benson, Charlie, Kenneth and Maximilian. And one more engine as it would turn out, Ruth. As it turned out, shortly before Mister's crash, Remus had purchased yet another engine to add to the roster. And officially for no particular reason. Don't really know what he was thinking. But anyway, after Julian became controller, he tried to cancel the deal since there was no need for yet another engine, but it was too late. And thus, when Ruth finally arrived, she was immediately transferred over to the East Saturn Railway. She thankfully proved to be a great fit, helping the new services get off the ground. Well, call me impressed. That's a lot of changes in such a short time frame. I guess that begs the obvious follow-up question. Did it work? Did the railway finally become profitable? Yes, it did. All the changes proved to be incredibly successful. Goods services were fuller than ever, passenger numbers finally started to climb, And with the very diversified setup, the finances saw a complete turnaround. So much so that already the following year, in 1908, the railway would finally generate its first proper profit since 1889. That's a 19-year break. Crazy, that is. And I imagine that it left a lot of debt. Loads of debt. We had a lot of catching up to do. But with the profits now on the rise, we were able to keep up and finally started to pay back what we owed. While not necessarily staggering, it was pretty slow growth, it was still more than acceptable and miles better than the previous decade. I gotta say, Julian, you've done an outstanding piece of work here. If I'm honest, I was pretty unsure that the railway could be saved in any major way with its finances in such a bad shape. But you proved me wrong. And I, and the rest of the island for that matter, are truly grateful for that. Well, I appreciate the kind words, Your Grace. It's very rewarding seeing the changes work so well as they do. They've basically been in the works for a few years now, with those being among the many suggestions I made for that man. But he never listened. He should have. I should have been more involved as well. To think it went so far is insane. The fact he was willing to bring the railway to its knees just so he could have a boost in his wealth. A sick individual, that man. No doubt about it. But he's thankfully not a part of this anymore. Long gone at last. And now, we can look towards a brighter future. At the moment, it's all about getting the economy back on track. No further expansions anytime soon. Only if the man calls for it, and if we can support it financially. Sounds like the right move, Julian. I'm very optimistic about your abilities. Let's hope that our greatest wishes can be realized. I'm a little confused right now. Why? With the railway doing so well, how did it go bust in the span of a few years? More bad fortunes. I guess we couldn't escape those. What happened? Well, the Great War happened. When Britain declared war on Germany, we suddenly saw a spike in goods work. This was due to much of the island's industrial facilities aiding the British war effort, thus resulting in much more goods to be handled. It quickly proved to be quite a strain for all engines. We had a bit of trouble keeping up properly with the loads. Jimmy, Jacob and Jesse tried their hardest but still needed a bit of help. The passenger trains were reduced so Riker, Ramoy and Reed could help more. Thankfully we didn't suffer any major problems with the shipments since the new harbor proved to be rather effective during the wartime craze. So that was something at least. Is that the main reason for your closure? Not quite. It certainly didn't help our situation. By then we were close to more or less probably recovering from the debt. But now we were struggling to keep up with the last bit. And then the final nail in the coffin came 2 months after the war officially started. The final event that truly sealed the deal. Whew. Well, if I ever wanted to pull 3 times my usual amount daily, I'd rethink my life choices. This is brutal. Terrible. I've never felt so overworked in my life. I'm surprised we've even kept up so well as we have. Me too. One would have think we'd lost traction by now. But not yet. Granted, we've gotten help from Riker, Ramoy and Reed, but still. Absolutely. We would have stopped if they weren't helping. But still, this is my 6th train today, and I'm not even close to being done. Still got many more to go. Me too. I got this one headed to Barrow and then another lot headed back to here again, traversing the whole railway back and forth with such loads. I don't like it. I don't think any of us do, but you should probably get going. Yeah, you're right. I'll get on my way. See you later, Jacob. Great Scott! What just happened?
Apparently the tunnel just collapsed. This is not good. Matter of fact, this is terrible. Shoot, we better head back to Battlefield and raise the alarm.
I guess we should have expected more bad luck. It just seems to run with the railway. Why of all times did it have to happen right now? This is the last thing we need. Well, we can fix it, right, sir? Get it cleaned up and resume operations as fast as possible? Evening, engines. I appreciate you all stopping by. I have an announcement. As you know, recently the Ballyhoo Tunnel collapsed. It has, quite literally, cut the railway in two. Now, of course, this has had a detrimental effect to our operations. Practically all our services have been halted. Since then, we've scrambled to reroute what we could. Transferred goods by road, delayed services, done everything in our power to keep things moving. But the truth is, it hasn't been enough. The timing couldn't be worse. With the war on, demand is higher than ever, but so are the costs. Materials, labor, emergency repairs, it all adds up, and with the main line severed, we're bleeding money by the hour. Also, keep in mind, we're missing a lot of manpower at the moment, since a lot of our workmen have been sent to the front lines. So, attempting a reconstruction of the tunnel at the moment is almost an unfeasible venture. We've gone through the books, checked every figure twice, and after a long, painful deliberation, we've decided that as of tomorrow, the Sodor Mainland Railway will cease operations. Not permanently, but for now, we must go into full suspension. The network will shut down. No trains, no goods, no services, until further notice. I don't make this decision lightly. None of us do. But with no revenue, a still substantial amount of debt, and now the line split in two, continuing would destroy what little foundation we have left. Better to pause, protect what remains, and rebuild when the time is right. I hope none of you feel guilty in any way. None of you should. If one should, it should be me. You've all served this railway with strength, pride and heart, and I'm very proud to have worked with you lot. I know this isn't the ending any of us hoped for, nor the ending we wanted, but we have to be realistic. Things simply can't continue like this.
So, that's it then?
Pretty much. This is the best I could do given the situation. It's the only way the railway can really survive. Survive by stopping? That doesn't sound like survival to me. I understand how it sounds, Malcolm. But if we keep running at half strength, with double the demand and no main line, we'll break ourselves trying to keep up. And then there won't be any railway left to save.
What happens to us? Are we going to be sent away?
I don't want to phrase it like that. Like I said, we still have a lot of debt owed. And the best thing we can do right now is to sell off assets to help raise a bit of money towards that. Now I don't want to do this, but at this point I don't really have a choice. The intent is that you lot are going to be sold off to other railways. Sold? So we're just assets now? Numbers on a page? No, you are not. And you never will be. Never in my books. You're more than that. All of you. You've given everything. And I swear to you, I will only agree to sales if I'm certain that you'll be treated properly. I won't let you end up in some scrapyard siding halfway across the country. That's not a promise you can keep. Not once we're out of your hands. Maybe not. But I will try, and right now, trying is all I can. So that's it. 56 years of service, only to fall by the hands of bad luck and bad management.
That gosh darn Remus had to ruin everything. Now when we're finally starting to make a comeback, we get wiped from the map.
This is not what I wanted. None of this is. But the line is broken, the war is draining everything, and if we don't do something now, the entire railway, everything that's left, will be lost forever. If we hold on too tightly, we risk losing it all. This way, maybe something survives.
What happens to those who aren't sold?
If any engine isn't sold, they'll be put in storage. Carefully and safely. Open storage, so you don't feel isolated, but still stored, until there's a future again.
And if there's not?
There will be. I know. Right, that's all I have to say for now. Thank you. Each and every one of you. For everything. So, that was that. That was that. The railway was now, more or less, closed. and what followed was a rather large process of selling off the railway's rolling stock. Mostly the engines, since that's where they could get the most money. And all engines were eventually sold. Well, all except for me, Neil, and Matthew.
Nobody wanted you.
I mean, would you want a 50-year-old engine who was of a totally obsolete design?
I guess not.
Exactly. So, after a lot of trying, they eventually gave up, and we came under ownership of the Sodor government as part of the war effort. So, I guess one could say that all engines got new owners. No one was ever stored away.
That's something at least. But why would they want you if they didn't have any use for you?
Well, that's the thing. There was a use for us now. You see, the Duke was now also finally getting his way. For context, the railway had received minimal state support during the past 4 years. This was due to the then sitting parliament, who didn't want to give any more money to the railway since it seemed they would just waste it. Of course, this wasn't the case by then with Julian now in charge, but they didn't care. David II had actively tried to secure more funding to the railway, but without luck. He was constantly outvoted and over time became more irritated. The rest of the island also thought the parliament didn't do a good job, not just regarding the railway. As a result, after the 1914 parliamentary election, a totally new set of members were elected who were much more willing to allocate more funding to the railway. However, by this point, it was too late to save the Sodor Mainland Railway. So instead, a new project was initiated. The new idea was to finally give every major settlement on the island a rail connection. Remember, much of the western part of the island by this point was still missing that. The plan was they were to extend the mainline beyond Kildane all the way to Tidmouth. So, with monetary help from the British government, due to its strategic potential, the project was initiated. Now of course, a person was needed to lead the project. So, the Duke approached the most obvious choice.
Morning, Julian. Thank you for stopping by. No worries, Your Grace. So, I hear you have a proposal for me. Indeed. As you may know, we've recently initiated the Sodor Railway Future Project, with the goal of giving any major settlement on the island a railway connection. So that means extending past Kildane all the way to Tidmouth. Now of course, we need someone to lead this endeavor, and that's why I brought you here today. We want to present the opportunity to you, Julian. You seem like the obvious choice.
Obvious choice. How flattering.
Well, you've done more than enough to earn that distinction. So, what do you say?
Well, I appreciate the offer, Your Grace. It means a lot that you still believe in me. But, sticking to my ethics, I must decline the offer, Your Grace.
Decline?
I don't think I should get another chance so easily. I've had my chance at keeping this railway going for the better part of 30 years now. I had my shot, and I've done my very best. But at the end of the day, I don't feel like I did enough. It had to be 20 years before I finally got into the position of power that the railway needed. 20 years! Imagine how much I could have done in those 20 years if I was controller. But the fact that board kept the power for so long means I didn't do a good enough job. I would like to object towards the obvious choice distinction, because at the end of the day, the railway still closed during my tenure. I know there was a lot of other factors at play, but the point still stands. I don't think I should continue.
Well, that was slightly unexpected. I'm sorry to hear that you feel guilty for the closure. Now, as much as I may not necessarily agree with your view, given the other factors at play, I respect your decision. If you don't want to, then you shan't. We just have to find another candidate, wherever one does that.
Thank you, Your Grace. I am very grateful for your understanding.
And I'm also very grateful for the few years we've worked together. It's been a pleasure. The pleasure's all mine, Julian. But I suppose I can help you with one more thing.
What's that?
I might just know the person you should put in charge of this project.
Who? And, well, I imagine you can guess who he suggested.
Would it be Topham?
It would indeed. The two had met a few years back when Julian visited London and North Western Railway headquarters. And Julian was impressed by Topham's ambitions. And so was the Duke. It wouldn't be too long before Topham was put in charge of the project. And the rest, as they say, is history. There you go. That's all we have for you tonight.
Why?
Why what?
Why did you keep all of this hidden for so long?
Well, that reason goes back to Neil's famous saying, if one constantly worries about something going wrong, it will go wrong. We didn't want to pass that worry and fear onto you. We didn't want you to feel the same as we did during the end of the railway's tenure. We didn't want the North Western Railway to be a continuation of the Sodor Mainland Railway. We wanted it to be a fresh start for the island. So, until we were absolutely sure that the railway was in a stable and safe state, we would keep it hidden. Only now do we actually feel ready to open up about it, since the railway has become something the Sodor Mainland Railway could have only dreamt of. Only now are you free of economic troubles, severe engine shortages, and the looming, unsettling presence of the LMS. All the major troubles and concerns you've had in the past. Therefore, only now are you ready to receive this in full detail.
Wow, Very poetic, and understandable, I guess.
We might have dragged it a little longer than necessary, but what's happened has happened, and now it's all out. Out for all to learn.
Indeed. But I have to compliment you on the cover-up story you made. Very detailed and believable. Kept us from questioning for so long. Made us hate what you hated. The Wellsworth and Sodor Railway, for instance. By the way, I should ask, since I once worked there, how much of your downfall was to blame on them, since you made it out to be a lot?
Well, in all honesty, it was very minimal. Wouldn't say they were completely blameless. After all, we were getting outcompeted by Brendan. But you have to remember, the rivalry between those two boys dated back way further than the railways. So in the end, one shouldn't really blame them for anything.
I see. Well, I think I speak for all of us and soon the rest of the island. Thank you for telling us everything. I hope this can go a long way in clearing up any confusion. We'll just have to wait and see.
Have you heard the Sodor Mainland Railway story?
What do you mean?
They recently told us what really happened back in the day. And let me tell you, it's a lot different from what they've been telling me.
Oh, that? Yeah, I knew it before they even told it.
Wait, what? You did?
Yeah?
How?
Because we were neighbors. Like, the Furnace Railway was literally right across the rolling bridge. They were connected, you know. I got insider knowledge almost daily from the engines who ran to Barrow.
Yeah, of course you would've.
Huh, wonder why no one didn't realize that. I'm surprised too. Seemed pretty obvious.
True, but in that case, why didn't you say anything?
Well, first of all, I should never be the one to tell it. I don't know the details of a lot of the earlier years, mostly just the later ones. Second, cause Neil, Clive and Matthew told me to.
I see. Well, what do you think of it?
I think the same as everyone else. Wrong choices were made, and the end is very tragic. I can't really add much more to it.
Makes sense.
All the same, it really shows why competent management is needed. There was still so much for the railway to gain, but it was never realized, being shelved in favor of glory, prestige, and wealth. All of which never ended up happening.
Thank God the Northwestern Railway hasn't had that. It would really break the island.
Absolutely. And I feel bad for all the engines who experienced Remus and his horrible management skills. I hope they all ended up having successful careers after their tenure there.
Hopefully so. I wonder if they're still around. Neil, Clive and Matthew doesn't really seem to know whether or not anyone is.
For the sake of their well-being, I hope at least one of them are. Would be a real shame if none were left. Good morning, you three.
Good morning, sir. What brings you down here?
Well, it's because there's something I want you to do.
What would that be?
I want you all to head to Crovan's Gate.
All three?
All three.
Are we to bring any train or what?
No. Light engine all the way.
Okay. What are we going to do at Crovan's Gate?
There's something waiting for you, so you best get on your way now.
I wonder what he's talking about. Search me. Could be anything. I guess we just have to figure it out.